He booked a quiet window seat to manage his PTSD, something he did every flight without fail. But when a stranger demanded he give it up for her own comfort, things quickly spiraled out of control. What started as a simple no turned into a psychological standoff at 30,000 feet. This isn't just a story about a seat, it's about boundaries, resilience, and what happens when you push the wrong person too far. Miles Bennett didn't want trouble. He wasn't looking for it. A quiet seat by the window on a flight from Phoenix to Chicago was all he needed. After all, he wasn't just a passenger, he was a veteran, now a trauma counselor, flying in for a national conference on PTSD recovery. For someone who'd survived real war zones, airplanes weren't the issue, but feeling trapped, cornered, stared at, that was a different beast. That's why he always booked the same kind of seat window. Left side, mid-cabin, seat 14A. It wasn't just a preference, it was survival. He'd boarded early, settled into his spot, and let the calm of routine anchor him. But that peace didn't last long. A woman in her late 30s strutted down the aisle, oversized handbag swinging. The clack of her heels loud over the murmur of settling passengers. Her face was taut with practiced patience, but her eyes were sharp. She stopped at row 14 and narrowed her gaze. "You're in my seat," she said, though her ticket clearly said 14B. Miles looked up slowly. 14. A is mine, he said, voice calm. She sniffed. "I meant I need it. Claustrophobia. You wouldn't understand." He gave a gentle smile. "I actually might. But I booked this seat for medical reasons too. I need to keep it." She blinked, momentarily thrown off. "You're seriously not going to move?" "I'm afraid not." Her posture stiffened. A few people nearby looked over. She wasn't yelling yet, but the tension was drawing eyes. Whitney Caldwell. That was her name. Miles would hear it 10 minutes later when she shouted it at a flight attendant for not accommodating a medical emergency. The thing was, Miles had seen her long before she reached him, at the gate. She had cut ahead of families and people with disabilities, claiming she was priority even though her boarding pass clearly said Group 4. She had mocked a father trying to fold a stroller and argued with a gate agent over why she couldn't pre-board. So no, he wasn't surprised that she felt entitled to take someone else's seat. What surprised him was how far she was willing to go after the initial exchange. Whitney began escalating. She summoned a flight attendant, claiming Miles was aggressive, making her feel unsafe, and deliberately triggering her condition. The attendant, a composed young woman named Sarah, checked the seating chart, full flight, no options. "I'm sorry, Ms. Caldwell, but the window seat was pre-assigned. We can't force anyone to move." Whitney exhaled loudly, as if she'd been told she had to stand the entire flight. Then she turned to Miles with an icy smile. "I hope you're proud. Enjoy your little victory." He said nothing. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Whitney began what Miles would later refer to as psychological theater. She gasped at the air vents, fidgeted violently in her seat, muttered under her breath about being suffocated, and even tried to pry open the plastic window shade like it might lead to freedom. Passengers were beginning to whisper. A flight attendant checked on her again. "Would you like to get off before we take off?" "Ma'am, no," she snapped. "I'm fine. I just need a better seat. We've already explained. I said I'm fine." That was when Miles knew she wasn't interested in comfort. She wanted control, and when she couldn't get it, she'd make someone pay. As the plane climbed, the passive aggression turned personal. She bumped him with her elbow every few minutes, dropped water accidentally on his leg, claimed her tray table was broken, and kept slamming it up and down, each time. Miles simply adjusted. Quiet, precise, intentional. He lowered his tray and left it there, boxing in her elbow room. He angled his body just enough to give her the sense of a wall without touching her. He turned his phone brightness to full while she tried to nap and adjusted the air vent to blow directly at her when she leaned in too close. It wasn't cruelty. It was a boundary. And boundaries, he knew, weren't enforced with shouting. They were held with silence and steel. Whitney tried another tactic. She fake cried, loudly. "I can't breathe," she whimpered. "I'm being suffocated." A flight attendant brought her water. "I need medical attention," she declared. "Ma'am, if it's an emergency, we can land the plane," the attendant said. Little too hopefully." Whitney's eyes widened. "What? No, I'm not ruining my trip," another passenger muttered. "Could have fooled me. Eventually." Whitney gave up on theatrics. She slumped into her seat and dozed off, her anger deflating now that no one was playing her game. Miles stared out the window, his breathing slow, steady, just as he'd taught hundreds of veterans to do when the world tried to close in, when the plane touched down in Chicago. Whitney bolted upright. No thank you. No goodbye. She stormed off the plane as soon as the seatbelt sign blinked off. Miles waited. He didn't rush. He gathered his things, nodded to the flight crew, and walked down the aisle. As he passed row 16, a middle-aged woman leaned out and whispered, "You handled that like a masterclass," he smiled. "Thank you." What no one on that flight knew, what Whitney never cared to ask, was that Miles had spent 15 years training soldiers not just in combat, but in how to keep their heads when everything around them exploded. He ran trauma recovery workshops. He taught people how to manage panic attacks, night terrors, and rage. He taught them to reclaim their control. And now, in seat 14A, he'd had to reclaim his own. Later that night, he sat in his hotel room, replaying the flight not in anger, but as a case study. He thought about how easily entitlement can disguise itself as victimhood, how rage will use any excuse to justify itself, and how the most powerful resistance isn't always confrontation, it's dignity. He wrote a few notes in his journal. She wasn't the enemy, just the mirror. Some people screamed to be heard, but some people listened to stay free. He closed the journal, exhaled. Tomorrow, he would speak to a room of 50 counselors about how to help trauma survivors find peace in chaos. And now, thanks to Whitney Caldwell, he had one more story to tell. A story about seat 14A and the quiet war she never won.